And now, The Federal Drive with Terry Gerton, sponsored by GEHA.
Welcome to The Federal Drive on Federal News Network. It's Tuesday, February 24th, 2026. I'm your host, Eric White, filling in for Terry Gerton, and I'm glad you're here. Coming up on this hour of The Federal Drive, if you think an old tax issue is behind you, the IRS may be about to prove otherwise. Plus, for victims, a quick stop at an ATM or gas station can turn into wiped out accounts and days of financial chaos after a skimmer steals their card data. Those stories and much more ahead during this hour of The Federal Drive. But first, 2 decades ago, NASA Administrator Michael Griffin said the space agency has become too dependent on outside contractors, hollowing out some of the skills the agency needs in-house to oversee and evaluate programs. Similar concerns rose to the top when NASA kicked off its Vision 2040 project in 2018. Now it's NASA Administrator Jared Isaacman's turn to pave over this well-known ground. In this week's Federal Report, Federal News Network Executive Editor Jason Miller writes about why this latest attempt to refocus and reinvigorate NASA's workforce may be different. Jason also joins me now to discuss. Jason, welcome aboard.
Thanks, Eric.
So NASA Administrator Isaacman is in. He launched a new workforce directive earlier this month. What's it looking to do, as this is one of his first major moves as administrator?
You're absolutely right. In his first 50 days, he went around, he visited all the space centers, he talked to employees, and this is really what he came from and said, hey, we need to tackle this long-term systemic problem across NASA. He says he wants to shift the work away from contractors and toward federal employees and focus on the agency's what he called core competencies. Now, Isaacman laid out a series of initiatives for NASA to take over the next few months, and here's Isaacman outlining some of these plans in a message he posted on X.
We are tearing down artificial civil servant hiring ceilings and bringing the teams we need back to NASA to execute on President Trump's vision. First, rebuilding internal talent. Within 30 days, every center and mission directorate will assess which technical and operational roles need to come back in-house.
Now, these assessments will identify the outsourced or what they call missing technical and operational expertise, provide a proposal to convert these core roles into the civil service. Now, the mission directorates and chief human capital officer and other leaders should categorize their proposals by priority, mapping to core competency, current contracting mechanism. They should emphasize solutions that enable mission execution without introducing additional layers of redundancy and management. Now, additionally, these assessments should identify engineering, operational, scientific, manufacturing, and other mission-critical work currently outsourced and provide a proposal of what should be brought in-house and aligned with this workforce assessment. Now, Isaacman says about 75% of the workforce are contractors who are managed by a smaller civil servant workforce. He says that's not only highly inefficient, it also leads to continuous program delays, and it's also costly, with NASA spending nearly $1.4 billion a year on what he called needless expenses. Now, to overcome a lot of this, within the next 60 days, NASA will implement rapid onboarding to consistently bring on new employees.
To ensure the funnel of new talent is always filled, we are supporting OPM's Tech Force initiative, bringing in term-based hires from industry and academia, and launching robust internship, training, and mentorship to develop the technical talent we require.
Now, part of this falls to the Chief Human Capital Officer, Chief Acquisition Officer, the CFO offices, as they will develop a transition strategy to consolidate workforce assessments, create an implementation plan to convert, or as I said, add targeted roles to the civil service, addressing contract changes, renegotiations, terminations, timelines, cost implications, really the whole kit and caboodle. And then third, Isaacman says NASA wants to empower its own current workforce.
We are incorporating right to repair provisions in all future contracts, guaranteeing NASA access to specifications, parts, tools, and technical documentation. We're eliminating restrictive clauses that prevent us from doing our own work and addressing intellectual property barriers that have tied our hands. Third, fostering a culture of technical excellence, hands-on engineering, and continuous learning, recognizing technical contributions and creating makerspaces at every center. We're restoring in-house engineering and operational excellence to reclaim technical autonomy and concentrating our resources on the most needle-moving objectives.
Now, the third piece here, you heard him talk about these things called maker spaces. Now, Isaacman says this will enable rapid prototyping, proposal development, look at potential funding mechanisms, including partnerships and relationships to critical vendors to really support this idea of implementation sustainability of these new technologies.
We're speaking here with Federal News Network executive editor Jason Miller. All right, so he's throwing out a lot of the right words that we've all kind of heard before, though. These were all workforce concerns that previous administrators have brought up and have tried to implement new measures to mitigate them. How is this one going to be different than the past efforts that were made to address these concerns?
In many ways, Eric, this is going to build on the existing efforts and really a lot of the frustrations that NASA leaders have faced over the last 20 years. In doing research for this story, I found reports going back to the early 2000s highlighting very similar concerns about the workforce. Let me give you a couple examples. In 2003, the Comptroller General David Walker at the time told lawmakers about NASA's goals to close critical skill gaps. In 2006, a House Committee on Science held a hearing focused on the workforce, and NASA's then Chico, Tony Dawsey, said NASA's workforce strategy hinges on key actions and initiatives, implementing new workforce planning processes, assessing competency gaps with greater detail and accuracy, and making effective use of a broad array of human capital tools and options. Fast forward to 2018, and NASA launches its Vision 2040 plan, what it will look like in 2040. And I caught up with Mary Davey. She's the former Deputy Associate Administrator for Mission Support Directorate. And she told me that this 2040 effort was trying to answer several questions about the workforce, including okay, what are the core competencies of the workforce? What does NASA's need the outside expertise of contractors for? Now, Davey, who retired from federal service in 2023 after more than 35 years in federal government, says it's clear that the commercial sector has proven that they're doing things that NASA maybe would never have thought of, like reusing rockets, and they can do it as a much higher cadence. So this idea back to 2040, the vision, is about, okay, what can NASA do inside of its own role, and what can the private sector do while keeping, from NASA's perspective, oversight, keeping safety and risk in mind, keeping projects on time and on budget. And then, Eric, in 2022, the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine added to this discussion with a report that lawmakers requested in the 2022 CHIPS and Science Act. Now, this National Academies report goes much deeper than the workforce challenges, but it does recognize things like lower salaries that NASA can offer and the transitioning of hands-on engineering opportunities being moved away from NASA employees into the private sector are two of these big issues that NASA continues to address. So I think, as you can see, Isaacman's initiatives are really bringing up a lot of the things we've been talking about and NASA's been trying to address for many, many years and really are now systemic challenges.
Yeah, what is the state of NASA's workforce today? It has been lauded as one of the more solid agencies to work for, always up high in the Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey, a lot of engagement there. Is that still the case today?
The data really shows it's a tale of two stories. To your point, NASA remains a top place to work in government, according to the Federal Viewpoint Survey, the Partnership for Public Service reports. From 2012 to 2024, NASA has been ranked number one among large agencies as the best place to work. Most recently, in 2024, it got a score of 81.6, which is down for the fourth year in a row, but still generally high compared to the rest of government. At the same time, when you look at OPM's data on NASA, it has seen a huge workforce reduction in 2025. It lost about 1,200 employees over the last 18 months or so, and has a total workforce of about 16,869, which is the lowest in a decade or more. And it remains very heavy in the GS-13 to GS-15 range, with fewer than 500 people at GS-11 or below. Now, this is, I think, part of the reason why Isaacman is putting such emphasis on recruiting new talent. Now, not all people you recruit will be GS 6, 9s, and 10s, but you need a consistent pipeline of people coming through, and they are very, very, I think, top-heavy.
Rebuilding an organization's workforce of any size really can be difficult. What are some of the unique challenges that NASA faces as it tries to do the same?
I'm going to bring back Mary Davey, who spent, again, 35 years in government. Well, she spent about 3 or 4 years at NASA. In fact, she told me her family, and this is a great fact, has more than 80 years of experience at NASA. Her dad started work at NASA in 1960 and worked there for about 35 years. So a lot of history there. But she says one of the biggest challenges NASA faces is a basic culture of the organization. NASA has done a lot of organizational rework over the years, including some of the things that Isaacman is calling for, but too often it never really gets implemented. Davey says that past NASA efforts would land on, okay, here's the path forward, but then nothing would change because of this culture challenge. She says the centers, there's 10 centers around the country, as we all know. Many like having that autonomy and authority to deliver on their mission. And while they're very good at what they do, they don't like change. I mean, no one likes change, right, Eric? But they get very nervous when it comes to okay, what are you going to change about what we do? Now, Davey says what Isaacman is really trying to do is a culture reset. And so when he talks about things like mission-driven intensity and bias toward action, she believes he's probably discovered through all these meetings he's had that there's a lot of governance, a lot of oversight. Decisions take a very long time. She says it felt like every executive in the agency was involved in every single decision because of the way the culture was put together. Now, Davey says she believes Isaacman really says NASA needs to balance process versus outcome, and then also take into account these ideas of critical risk and safety factors, which has been a hallmark of NASA over really the last 50, 60 years, the safety and risk factors. But too often it gets bled into some of the other things that they're trying to do to improve their processes, that everything's looked through this lens when only really certain things need to be looked through the lens of risk and safety. Isaacman has got a huge challenge ahead of him, without a doubt, Eric. And Davey and others I've talked to believe, hey, it's smart to go down this path. This is not necessarily a new path, but new leadership, new approaches, new ideas have to push NASA into a different direction.
Federal News Network Executive Editor Jason Miller, thank you so much.
Always a pleasure, Eric.
And you can check out Jason's Federal Report at federalnewsnetwork.com. Still to come, for victims, a quick stop at an ATM or gas station can turn into wiped out accounts and days of financial chaos after a skimmer steals their card data. This is the Federal Drive with Terry Gerton on Federal News Network. I'm Eric White filling in for Terry. Welcome back to the Federal Drive with Terry Gerton on Federal News Network. I'm Eric White filling in for Terry. Card skimming is no longer a local nuisance. It's become a coordinated multi-state fraud pipeline built on speed, technology, and volume. The Secret Service is tracing how these crews operate, and partnerships with banks and local police are helping shut them down. Federal News Network's Terry Gerton recently spoke to Secret Service Special Agent Michael Peck about the scope of the threat and the impact on victims.
Most of us know the Secret Service from either what we see on TV or what we think about in terms of protective details, but the Secret Service has a really important law enforcement function, especially when it comes to financial crime. So tell us first about that role and those responsibilities.
As you said, we're primarily known for protection, and that whether it's the president, the vice president, or dignitaries, the Secret Service is the leading agency for that, for the U.S. But on the other side of the house, as part of our dual mission, we are charged with financial crimes protections. The Secret Service really was started because of that in 1865 to, at the time, fight counterfeiting. And we have progressed from there to protecting the financial infrastructure of the United States.
You just put out a new report talking about the investigative efforts across 2025, looking at card skimming and related financial fraud. What was driving that focus?
About 2 years ago, we started looking at transnational organized crime groups that were specifically coming to the United States to steal from federal benefits programs and to, capitalize on unknowing victims. We started really in California doing cash out arrest operations where we would target ATMs, we would monitor, see them doing active cash outs of stolen cards and pocketing the cash. That led to a more in-depth conversation that said nationwide, one of the biggest problems we have here in the United States is skimming, the stealing of credit card numbers. And it affects really everybody across the nation because at any point you can become victim. After talking to our analytic team, they said the way you can shut this down is to get skimmers off the streets. Well, it's not that easy. So we sat down, we talked through processes, how we could do it, and we ran an operation in Las Vegas. And what we did was we sent a number of teams out into the field to go to merchants and to go to retailers, and not only to educate them and bring up the fact, hey, we're the Secret Service and we're here to help, but the fact that we want to stop this epidemic impacting our country and the overall financial infrastructure. That operation has developed, and like law or like medicine, it is a practice. We're constantly learning and adapting and working through criminal trends and looking at what best practices work. And since then, we've run over 30 operations across the country, and that goes from Alaska to Florida, from California to Boston. We look at data, we look at trends, and we seek out in these cities where we think active skimmers are. And it is leading to some great success. I believe at this point we're pushing about $500 million in fraud loss prevention because of these efforts. So the biggest fact is behind the scenes is all the work that goes into it analytically through our analytical team and our technical team. We try to capitalize on that because, like you said, we're known for protection. Special agents of the Secret Service are on the protective mission, which leaves us analytic and tactical personnel to deploy and still carry that mission forward for us as we seek to, really protect the United States in a whole different manner.
When you speak about data and analytics and trends, what are the trends that you're seeing? How do these groups operate?
So for the longest time, the misnomer was the fact that we didn't think any of these groups were organized. We thought they were individual little, cells or whatever crossing the country and stealing. That's not the case. They are well organized. They know how they're going to get the components into the United States. They know how they're going to build these devices. They know how they're going to install them, where they're going to install them, what they're going to do with the stolen information, and how they're going to capitalize on that stolen information. One of the biggest things about these federal benefit cards specifically is the fact that they can possess up to 88 programs on these cards. These groups know how to capitalize on those programs, and they know how to get cash. They know how to conduct trade-based money laundering, and they know how to capitalize on every amount of dollar that they can in order to steal. And sadly, many of our victims are in need of these benefits. We have heard countless stories across the country of people that have their funds stolen. They're at the grocery store. They are checking out. Their food is ready. It is ready to be purchased, and they can't. And they have to walk away. And it is crushing to hear these stories. And even more so, when we're educating retailers and we're talking to the public about these efforts, in many cases, the people working at these businesses have also been a benefits recipient at one point. And they say, my numbers were stolen, my card number was stolen, I didn't get my benefits. And sadly, growing from that, some of these victims have been victims month after month after month because their numbers continuously get stolen.
I'm speaking with Michael Peck. He's Assistant Special Agent in charge of the Global Investigative Operations Center at the U.S. Secret Service. You mentioned business owners. How have they responded to this operation?
Positive. It actually has been a really, really good operational effort. In most cases, 99.9%. The businesses, we talk to them, we hear some of their stories, we educate them on, hey, these are the things to look for, these are the common trends, and we'll actually show them, security features and things on either their point of sale terminals, their ATMs, or even their gas pumps to say, hey, this is what you're looking for. And if you see, that anomaly, you may have a problem here. So you can either, check for it yourself, you can call a technician for your company, whatever you need to do. But overall, it's been very, very positive. And, I can't stress this enough. When it comes to emergency management, we talk about the whole community approach. Well, I think when it comes to law enforcement, and especially this effort, it's a whole community approach. The Secret Service can't do it alone. All right. We are partnering with other federal agencies. We are partnering with state and local agencies. And we're talking to churches. We're talking to community leaders. We're talking to the businesses. We're talking to educational institutions. It's going to take all of us to combat the problems we have in order to develop that sense of resiliency.
Let's dig into those partnerships a little bit more. How do they help you track and stop these kinds of crimes?
So we work with, whether it's, our public sector partners like the USDA, Homeland Security investigations, even the FBI. Working with them, we're able to share information together. We work with the private sector, who has an abundance of data, and then we'll work with the retailers. What are you seeing for current trends? And we compile all that, and that allows us to move forward as we progress into cities and say, all right, based off of everything coming together, this is what we have and this is what we're facing. This is what we want to do. And that allows us to build our plan. But again, it's very collective in this effort.
How are you planning to build on the success of this effort so far?
We are not stopping. As I said before, this is a practice, and we are learning. The criminals are adapting, and they're changing, their modes of operation, and so are we. We are constantly looking at what is the current trend. What are we seeing? A skimmer we may see in Atlanta may be completely different from what we're seeing in New York City or, Detroit or LA. Why? Okay. And then we have to look at where are these components coming from? What are the foreign sources? Okay. How are they getting into the United States? That causes us, do we need to work with Customs and Border Protection or work with even, the airports? All right. How are these getting in the U.S.? How can we stop that aspect? There is a multifaceted approach to combating all this, and there really is no one answer. But if working together collectively will make a difference.
I suspect there's also a self-defense mechanism for folks who are listening now. What do you most want them to know to protect themselves or spot a skimmer?
First, protect yourself by tap to pay. That is still the best way to not have your card data stolen. Okay. If you can't and you have to insert or swipe, take that couple seconds and look at the terminal. Is there glue marks? Is there tape residue? Are the numbers off? Is the coloring off? Does it not look like the terminal at the next register over? Is it fatter than normal? Does it look like something maybe over on top of what the traditional size is? The little points of due diligence may make a difference. And I don't want to say don't visit that retailer, but you may want to take a second and say, hey, can you check your terminal? I think there's something here. Something's not right. And even that will raise awareness for the retailer moving forward, who will think, you know what? I need to do better due diligence on our side. We've talked about the retailers and, are they receptive to this? I will say we've been back to cities and we visit a lot of the same businesses. And there have been cases where we found them again. But also, many of the businesses are like, I'm checking every day. And these are the steps I'm taking. And their proactive approach is what we need to really assist us in this effort across the country.
Michael Peck is Assistant Special Agent in Charge, Global Investigative Operations Center at the U.S. Secret Service. We'll post this interview at federalnewsnetwork.com/Federal Drive. Subscribe to the Federal Drive wherever you get your podcasts. Still to come, if you think an old tax issue is behind you, the IRS may be about to prove otherwise. It's the Federal Drive with Terry Gerton on Federal News Network. I'm Eric White filling in for Terry. Back on the Federal Drive with Terry Gerton here on Federal News Network. I'm Eric White filling in for Terry. With enforcement ramping up and penalties increasing, the voluntary disclosure program is becoming the safest way to resolve past tax mistakes before they turn into something bigger. To walk through the risks, red flags, and first steps, Federal Drive host Terry Gerton spoke with Valerie Makarowicz and Tino Lasella, partners at Carlton Fields.
Valerie, I want to start with you. Here at Federal News Network, we have covered a lot about the IRS's staffing challenges, and as we're getting into filing season, how challenging it is going to be for them. But you all are suggesting that now is the time for people to look at the IRS Voluntary Disclosure Program, or VDP. Seems like it would be a time to maybe not think about that. Why is this so important?
Harry, ignoring your obligation to file and pay your tax returns timely is never a good idea. The VDP program that the IRS is proposing can assist taxpayers with past due returns that have yet to be filed or non-compliance in payment and significantly reduce their risk of prosecution.
Tino, For folks who don't know this program very well, what exactly does voluntary disclosure involve, and what protections might it provide?
That's a great question. So voluntary disclosure practice is a program in which people who believe they may have a willful violation of the tax code, meaning a voluntary intentional violation, can come in, and if they are not under any sort of investigation or examination, so civilly by the IRS or criminally by the IRS, if nothing is opened on them yet, it allows them to provide certain background information to assist the IRS in determining whether there's something open on them somewhere within the IRS. That's called the pre-clearance process. And assuming they clear that, then there's the next step of providing the IRS more information. And the updates the IRS is proposing to the program streamline it and make it a little bit more predictable for taxpayers.
So you're talking about someone who is willfully not paid their taxes, right? So intentionally, knowingly not filed. Not somebody who maybe just doesn't know that they have to pay taxes, or someone who's made a mistake in the past. Valerie, talk me through how waiting might actually expose these folks to harsher penalties.
No one wants to walk through life looking over their shoulder, waiting for the IRS to come knock at their door. I think people inherently want to comply with the tax law and want to do and pay their fair share. So for those who are ignoring this, their knowing and intentional non-compliance with the tax laws, it can subject you not only to harsh penalties, the compounding of interest, but certainly it exposes you to potential prison time.
Tina, would you like to add on?
Sure. And to be clear, Terry, it's actually broader than just the non-payment and the non-filing of tax returns. It could be the filing of false tax returns and other false documents to the IRS. So it is an opportunity if someone, again, if it was willful, if someone willfully filed a false tax return and they want to correct that. So it's more than just the failure to pay and the failure to file. It's correcting past affirmative misstatements to the IRS as well.
Valerie?
Perhaps someone forgot intentionally that they earned some Bitcoin income. That can be included in the VDP program to amend the return, correct it with the IRS, and pay the tax due and owing.
You all have written an article that gives some examples here, and one of them caught my eye. Activities that are legal in states, but perhaps not at the federal level, like marijuana dispensaries. How should someone think about that? Valerie?
Income that is illegal on the federal sense, all income should be reported, regardless of its source. The VDP program, however, is not available to report income that is illegal federally to earn, but legal on the state side.
So it's not an amnesty program?
Definitely not. It will reduce and be a factor in what the IRS thinks about your case in determining whether or not to bring criminal tax charges. But it is not an amnesty program. This is not your ability to get out of jail entirely, but it can significantly reduce your criminal exposure.
I'm speaking with Valerie Makarowicz and Tino Lasella, who are partners at Carlton Fields. Tino, let me come back to you. As we think about staffing challenges at the IRS, what are you seeing in how the IRS is shifting its enforcement posture here? Do they have enough in-house investigative capacity to go after these cases, or are they partnering with other organizations?
I think that there's both happening. I think that it would be foolish to think that a reduced staff necessarily means reduced enforcement. The IRS, I'm sure, would always like more resources, both on the criminal side and the civil side. And the more criminal agents there are, the more criminal cases that could be brought. But I think that they're also doing more with less. I think they're relying more on technology. And I think that you will see, if people haven't already, probably see more partnerships with other agencies. But I think that the enforcement environment is a healthy one. It's ongoing, and I don't expect that it will slow down. The IRS has been through staffing challenges before, and they always find their way through it and usually become more efficient as a result.
Valerie mentioned a couple of these earlier: third-party reporting, informants and whistleblowers, parallel investigations, data analytics, international information flows. So if someone thinks that they willfully didn't file their taxes, but they're not going to get caught, these are a lot of other ways that that information could get to the IRS, right?
That's exactly right. The IRS gets information to open criminal investigations from a number of different sources. You just named several, Terry. So that's right. There's no, people shouldn't feel safe because they say, oh, well, what's the likelihood that I'm going to get caught? Because, as Valerie pointed out, it could be a subpoena that was initially not even related to the taxpayer, but somehow their information is caught up in it. And then there's an indicia of noncompliance. And so that now all of a sudden brings that person into focus. And again, once they're in focus, they're not eligible for participation in this program. So that's why, if there is a problem, like Valerie said, people don't want to look over their shoulders their entire lives. And the statute of limitations in tax cases is a long one. And so the time for people to get compliant is sooner than later.
Valerie, let me come back to you and ask, what might coming into compliance entail for an individual tax filer in this case?
Sure. There are a few requirements that the VDP program has to make sure you qualify and that you disclose all relevant information to the IRS. First, there's about a 6-year look-back period. So if you've not paid or underpaid your tax or underreported your tax, you're going to need to provide the past 6 years of tax returns. You also, if you're selected for the VDP program, you're going to need to file that very quickly. Though the IRS is requesting about 3 months from the conditional acceptance into the program for a taxpayer to act quickly and file required returns and pay the required tax, penalties, and interest. And then there are some predictability measures in place for the penalty structure and what will be required of a taxpayer to not only pay the tax that they owe, but applicable penalties plus interest to become fully compliant.
And Tina, you mentioned earlier that the IRS is considering some changes to the VDP program. What are those right now, and what do people need to know about them?
Right. So as Valerie talked about, the way that the program currently exists, someone gets pre-cleared, and then they provide certain information as requested by the form, and then it's assigned to an examiner. So they sort of wait. This new program really puts more of the onus on the taxpayer themselves, but which also though creates sort of more of a defined timeline. So once they're cleared, they have, as Valerie said, they have 3 months to file 6 years worth of either tax returns if they were a non-filer, or amended returns if they were a filer and those returns were false, and either full pay or agree with IRS as to a full pay payment plan. So it looks like what the IRS is trying to do is really make this more predictable in terms of a timeline and much more efficient. So instead of waiting for an examiner to come and examine the returns and do this full-scale audit, the onus is now on the taxpayer. File accurate returns, whether original or amended, and you pay or get a payment plan that's acceptable to the IRS.
So, Tina, what's your parting words of advice for tax filers?
Always be compliant currently. Whatever you've done in the past, one of the things our article says is stop the bleeding. It's never too late to become compliant. And then if you've had past compliance issues, now is the time to consider the voluntary disclosure practice to correct those past problems as well, and hopefully try to avoid prosecution.
And Valerie?
do the right thing. Our nation runs on a voluntary compliance system, and we count on our neighbors to contribute their fair share to the government. Do the right thing, come into compliance, fix your past willful mistakes, and get right with the IRS.
Valerie McCarowitz and Tino Lasella are shareholders at Carlton Fields. We'll post this interview at federalnewsnetwork.com/Federal Drive. Subscribe to the Federal Drive wherever you get your podcasts. Still to come, now that shutdown talk is mostly over with, it's time for many federal contractors to get down to business. It's the Federal Drive with Terry Gerton on Federal News Network. I'm Eric White filling in for Terry. Welcome back to the Federal Drive with Terry Gerton on Federal News Network. I'm Eric White filling in for Terry. With the threat of a shutdown gone for most of the government at least, contractors can now shift their focus to some eventful business opportunities. For one thing, NASA is going through a sort of transformation, plus the upcoming FIFA World Cup could present some interesting opportunities. For more on that, we welcome Jim Carroll, CEO of the Professional Services Council. Mr. Carroll, thank you for taking the time.
Thank you for having me on. It's going to be a busy week.
That sounds like it. I guess let's start first with NASA, as the new administrator over there, Jared Isaacman. Took a little while for him to get going and get into place, but now that he is, I understand that there are some workforce initiatives that are looking to take place. There's going to be some major restructuring, it seems like. What do you know? What's the latest?
Yeah, Administrator Isaacman has really hit the ground running. One thing that is fun, I think, in terms of what NASA is doing right now is the launch of Artemis 2, which should be occurring here within a month, maybe 2 months, I think at the most. And I know, and I've heard him talk publicly about this, that is something that's very exciting for him. I think, and I'm just, I'm guessing here, but I think the amount of work that he is doing on Artemis 2 has brought to him the amount of work that is being done by both contractors as well as the NASA employees, who our contractors sit side by side with. And the administrator did come out with an internal memo almost 2 weeks ago, I guess, at this point, about restoring and retaining in-house engineering and other types of scientific work inside NASA. And, I think from a citizen perspective, that's sort of nice to hear. And you think about NASA and all the great work that's been done. And so I think that him trying to rebuild NASA is a show that there's a lot of interest by the president and Congress. We've seen that during his confirmation hearings in the Senate. And I think what's important, though, for the contractors who currently do a lot of work there is demonstrating the values that they bring, the expertise that they bring, and the uniqueness that the technology that they have at their hands back either at their companies or by sitting there, as I said, side by side with the employees, they really provide a valuable talent that can't be provided elsewhere. And so I think as we get more and more into this and see the role of contractors and the excitement about Artemis 2, we need to make sure that everyone has a broad understanding. But I think, from a NASA perspective, we'll continue to see some really good work coming out of Administrator Isaacman. I know his deputy is about to be confirmed or was just confirmed. And so again, his deputy comes from a government contracting background. And so I think it'll be interesting to sort of see how this evolves. But we're not worried at all.
Yeah, so it sounds like you have a little positive outlook here. What kind of effect will this be looking for federal contractors as they, look to get 2026 going? I mean, it was a delayed start. So now that things are up and running, how do you see this affecting them?
I really think it will remain steady. The one sentence of his internal memo, I think, is key. I'll quote it real quick. The foundation will be the foundation of NASA. This foundation will be strengthened by contractors in non-core areas and for surge requirements. And that's exactly what contractors do. They bring in expertise, sometimes in core areas, in addition to non-core, but they really can surge when necessary and shrink when necessary. And so I think we'll continue to see that more and more. And I'm really optimistic because I know so many of the folks that are there in NASA, they have such unique talents and skills that they really are indispensable.
Talking here with Jim Carroll, CEO of the Professional Services Council. And one other major event that's coming up that several of us are excited about, not just for the contracting opportunities, but the FIFA 2026 FIFA World Cup is right on the helm. You wouldn't think that there would be a major opportunity here for government contractors, but this is going to be a kind of all hands on deck situation. What role do you see the government industry side playing?
Yeah, it's really, it's a lot of preparation for this through the federal government and the contractors. I have to say on a side note, because we're talking about the role of security and Intel providing support for the FIFA games, when you look at what happened over the past weekend about the Mexican government getting El Mencho, the head of the CJNG cartel, and the disruption that has happened in Mexico as a result of this cartel being really decapitated, it shows that these are national security events. And I bring up Mexico because, there are games, FIFA games being played in Mexico, and the role is really unique for the contractors. 11 U.S. cities, and we had a really good federal law enforcement conference recently, just a week or so ago. We got Andrew Giuliani, who is the White House lead for the FIFA games, to come and speak about security, public safety, the role of drones, the role of counter drones, and really the ability to surge, and how much larger it is than one Super Bowl, which we think of and which most people watch. This is the equivalent of 78 Super Bowls in 40 days. And so this is really a great role for contractors to show the value that they bring. The intel, the cyber, everything is really a wonderful role for our contractors to step up and show the safety and security that they provide.
Yeah, other than, providing the obvious, it's going to take a lot of manpower and security means you need eyeballs. Other than the human capital side of things and the staffing, what ways can we expand upon a little bit on how federal contractors will be supporting this event? Obviously, security is a big one, but I imagine that there are some other boxes that can be checked by the contractor roles. Do I have?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And Mr. Giuliani talked about that. And I have to be honest with you, it was one that I had not really thought about that much prior to his meeting with our members, was the role of government contractors in expediting visa and travel operations. Because we will be getting so many visitors to the country, because of it, we're getting so many athletes and teams where, we try to extend the courtesy of getting them through quickly. That, quite frankly, was an area that I had not given much thought to. But just like we talked about with NASA, this is a surge for our government contractors as we support the U.S. to win this summer, just like we won gold in the hockey. It'd be great to be able to have a similar win for not only our government contractors, but for the U.S. team.
That may be a far reach for us U.S. soccer fans to get with you on, but hey, you know what? It's they got to play the game still, right?
PSC, our PSC is the official trade association for FIFA. I don't. Okay, I'm kidding, but mentally we are, right? We're cheering them on.
Fantastic. We're cheering right alongside you. Anything else on the horizon for 2026? We don't have to get super into any of the specific dates or anything, but what else do you all see coming down the pipeline as, like I said, we get to this sort of delayed start now? Yeah,
Congress is just getting back. We're still in the midst of a relatively small DHS shutdown. But, the ones most impacted, I think, are the U.S. Coast Guard, who are clearly not political and doing God's work, safeguarding the country, and as well as safety and security. All of the SAR, search and rescue missions that they do, they're going without pay. And, that is disappointing. And so, our hope is this will be restored this week. Not the most optimistic person that will resolve this today or tomorrow, but we need to get that finished and up and running and let the government continue to provide services.
Jim Carroll is CEO of the Professional Services Council. Thank you so much as always.
Thank you. Have a great week.
you do the same. And we'll post this interview on our website. Head to federalnewsnetwork.com/Federal Drive. You can also find it wherever you get your podcasts. The Federal Drive with Terry Gerton is produced by me, Eric White, along with Michelle Sanderford. Our web editor is Stephanie Wright. For the latest updates, stay with federalnewsnetwork.com or follow us on Facebook and LinkedIn. Up next, the top national headlines from CBS News and the Federal Newscast. I'm Eric White filling in for Terry Gerton. Thanks for listening.